Uh, Good afternoon. It's Michael. I know there's several people here. Samira, are you also on the line? Hello? Can someone react? Oh, I see a yes from you, Samira. Thank you. So I am going to attempt my first Zoom with you all. And I wanted to share with you some thoughts. And Samira, if you will help me just manage questions, that would be fantastic. These are definitely unprecedented times for all of us. And I talked to Samira on Friday, and both of us felt like a call might be helpful because more than anything, what we want to do is help everyone think through options and opportunities to remain a viable business while we ride through what is clearly a time of deep uncertainty. There are a number of things that I think everyone is feeling, from crazy anxiety all the way to how do I plan for this? And what I wanted to do is just talk through a bit of the handout I provided and see if I'm going to join without the video. I don't look so pretty. There we go. There's everybody. Look at that. Good. Talk through the document I provided and then take questions. So I'm also going to try to open up the chat so that if you have questions, I can see that. But if I miss one, Samira, send me a text and let me know because I'll be trying to watch both. I think there's a few things everybody should first keep in mind. I don't know if you all listened to the press conference the president and the leadership team had just now, but they're expecting that this will last sometime into July and August. So we're looking at April, May, June, July, likely 4 or 5 months, a period of time. Today, depending on what is closed or not, has everything to do with local and state governments. I mean, today, for instance, on one of my companies in Chicago, we are closing down all of our dental practices because dental is extremely high risk and the governor asked we do that. So we're closing 30 dental practices in Chicago today. So I think we will see different levels of activity happening, a shutdown or voluntary quarantine versus required quarantine, depending on what's happening in any given marketplace. All of this leads to certainly high anxiety for everyone. I think for each of you as leaders and catalysts, the things that I would encourage you to do is first, no matter how you're personally feeling internally, remain as calm as you possibly can, particularly when you're talking to your team, because the more anxious they become, the less productive they become. And over time, you need the folks you have to be as productive and thinking as clearly as possible. That also means frequent communication with them. I would think you're probably wanting to do a touch base with everyone at least once a day, maybe even twice a day. And I don't care if there's only 2 or 3 of you there. Having a daily or twice a day check-in is just a really good time to take care of each other's well-being. I know at Shore we're already doing that, and we're doing a twice a day check-in with one another just in the morning and late in the day, just to connect and make sure everybody is okay. And also to share any new news that we have. So very frequent communication is sort of leadership job number 1. I know that the SBA is working on a number of both loans and grants for companies. And they announced earlier this week a plan to provide reimbursement for 2 weeks of paid sick leave for employers under 500 employees, which I think covers all of you. There'll be more of that to come. Do track what's going on with the SBA, because there may be both loans and or grants. Grants meaning you don't even have to pay it back. But do look for those as they come out over the next 30 days, because there will be those stimulus coming to help smaller businesses. Each of you also have to think about your own plan with the primary objective is for your business to remain viable. I mean, I try to look at it this way. First, through the lens of the leader of the company, and second, through the lens of your employees. And let's take a minute to look at each. And if you're looking at it through the lens of a company, you're prioritizing to say, okay, with the cash flow I have, how do I make hard choices? What am I paying for? What am I not paying for? And clearly one of the things that's heavy on your mind is people. Probably one of the last things on your mind is vendors. Sadly, for most of us, though, all of us are somebody's vendor. So that means our cash flow may be compromised from folks who owe us money too. So we have to think very carefully about what cash you have today and how collections are likely to change over the next 60 to 90 days. And the last 90 days is actually no indicator of what your cash collections will look like. My advice would be to talk to your customers if you haven't already, and I would have 2 or 3 parts of that conversation. I would first call just to see how are they, and are they doing okay? And secondly is how the 2 of you can work together through this period of time. And third, go ahead and talk about financially what you and they can expect from one another, because it's better to know than to be surprised and hope for the best and nothing happens. Because during this planning phase, the most important thing is to know what cash you have available and how long you can make that cash last. And I would plan for the next 90 to 180 days being pretty turbulent, and then things should settle out a bit. There are 3 or 4 ways that I think you have to plan. The first is you need to do some scenarios in your head and then work them out on paper. Think about your best case, worst case scenarios and everything in between, and answer as many what if questions that you can. After you've thought through those, spend some time in focusing, thinking about what are the top 2 high-level bullet things that you can do this week to help preserve the cash you have, take care of core customers, take care of people, and keep the business running on as many cylinders as possible. I also tend to try to think about what do I know and what is the unknown, because if I can live and dwell in some of the knowns, I get through crises better. Third, keep working. Don't let the unknown become a scapegoat for not getting work done, because every day there's something you can do to improve your relationships with your employees, with your customers, with your vendors, and your brand. And the companies who weather this and do it professionally and do it and come out on the other side can look like a hero to a whole lot of customers and employees. So it's a very defining moment for all of us. It's not easy. It's not easy for me, and I've been leading businesses 35 years, so I know for many of you it's a very challenging time. I do want to tell all of you that if I can be helpful to you, feel free to text or send me an email. I will get to it as quickly as I can, but I'll get to everyone and see if I can be helpful in some other way. When you run scenarios, I used in my written communication to you a football analogy of a team that runs plays. I know that may sound a little silly right now, but I tell you it works well for me, because if I know what I will do then when that moment comes around, I know exactly what to do and I don't need to think about it. I gave you some scenarios to think about, from one of your employees test positive to what happens when schools are closed, which apparently in Tennessee, that's happening this week, and all of our schools are going to be closed, which will certainly disrupt a lot of people's work life. One of your employees is positive or you are positive, what that means to the business and how you keep going. I think working through those scenarios in your head, because for many of you, one of those is going to happen. And when that happens, having a plan in place and a support system around you is very important. I also want to, commend Samira for pulling this call together I think this is a great time for us to rally and support one another as every way we possibly can. And I think we should use our group Gmail account as a way to connect group-wise, and I'll be sending some weekly things to everyone through that, if that's okay with all of you all. But you can feel free to message something back to the group if you have something of value that you think you've discovered that other people might be able to help. I would say in a business climate like this, the most important thing you can do is look at cash availability and how you give yourself as much cash runway as you possibly can. Because cash runway will allow you to remain viable through this uncertainty. And if you can remain viable through this, you can probably do anything on the other side you want to do. So think through what are the things you can do today and tomorrow and the next day that preserves your cash for as absolutely long as you possibly can. And then I guess the final thing to remember is that there will be an end to this. I mean, all these viruses run their course. This is probably one of the nastiest bugs we have ever seen. There's going to be more scary news coming out in the coming weeks, in my opinion. I think that as folks in our country see the numbers of infected people double and quadruple, and people are in hospitals and ICUs, and everybody knows somebody who has tested positive or is sick, that is going to be always on top of mind. So frequent communication with your people, showing care and concern, and all the little things you can do are really powerful for your team. But also you have to take care of yourself and your family. So a way we can communicate with one another is also extremely important, because you're going to need a support system for yourself while you're trying to be a support system for your people. Let me pause there a minute and see if anybody wants to open chat with any questions or anything. Since Samir and I talked on Friday, I've been working on a couple of tools that we're using at Shore to help our companies think about how to do some planning. I'll get a couple of those out to you over the next day or so that you can see what we're using to plan ahead and see if it could be of some value to each of you. Questions that anybody wants to unmute and ask or put onto the chat line? Okay, Andrea is asking, have you heard any updates on the payroll tax relief? What I have heard thus far is that for employers under 500, a policy to provide sick leave for 2 weeks, and that would be counted against Social Security. There has been a version of payroll tax relief passed the House on the President's conference today. He said the Senate was looking at that and may want to try to improve it a bit, and he thought between the House and the Senate they'd have something on his desk by the end of the week. I don't know that there's anything yet other than what the House has passed, Andrea. If anyone else knows anything new, by all means share, but I do believe right now it's in the Senate for consideration, and they're looking at it and trying to decide how to make it equitable and perhaps improve it for certain types of employer groups. But I don't think anything has passed at this point that's definitive, Andrea. But thanks for your question. Any others questions?
Michael, I got a question for you. This is Adam.
Hey, Adam.
Hey there. In Walking the Line, we put out a policy that if someone gets ill, we're going to pay for our hourlies. We're going to pay 20 hours a week for any time that they're out, up to 20 hours a week for any time they're out, in order to not incentivize people to take advantage of it.
Yeah.
The trick on that is that we are also probably going to experience a downturn in the amount of work that we have. So
yeah,
we don't want to incentivize people to be sick by not giving hours to people that are currently healthy. So want to make I'm wondering what your thoughts are on getting in this pigeonhole of, do we just guarantee everybody 20 hours a week minimum across the board? I've got about 15, 16 hourly guys. That would shorten my runway, but it would allow for, potentially some sort of reimbursement from the government, I would think.
Sure, it will. So Adam, your question is a good question, and it's something everyone should be thinking about.
Hey.
Someone is not muted and got a call coming in. Thank you. Adam, what I would encourage you to do is evaluate and make your choices on a rolling 2-week window. Okay.
Well, my hope was our cases don't have to stay overnight. 90%.
Okay. Can somebody mute? We got conversations we're hearing that we probably shouldn't be hearing.
Most of ours are at the atrium, which are separate from the main part of the hospital. But
I'm not sure who's talking, but I'll try to talk over them until they can mute. Samir, do you have the ability to mute everybody?
Yeah. And I think, God,
would you do that? And then people can unmute if they need to, or maybe Adam can.
Not just cosmetic, plastic surgery. We're talking about every joint replacement,
I don't think I can talk over that person.
All the ortho stuff that basically is probably the profit for the hospital.
Did we get it quiet? Oh, thank you.
Did I get what?
No, I guess we didn't. If you're talking, could you please mute so we can finish the conference call, please? So Adam, I don't know if you could hear me, but I would encourage you to try to take this on a rolling 2-week window, because things are going to keep changing.
Right.
And I wouldn't put out this is what we're going to do as a permanent until you have more data. And we're still early in this game. And so I try to run it as an every 2 week. Am I making sense? And so then you could do the 20 hours for the next 2 weeks, and then we'll reassess. That's the more of approach we're taking at Shore, because I have no idea what the world's going to look like in 2 weeks, and I don't want to be planning beyond what I know. And I have visibility for 2 weeks.
That makes sense. Thank you.
Yes. Emily is asking, can the government legally force us to close your doors?
Is elective. Elective.
Yeah.
Correct.
Hey, Michael, it's Samir. Can you hear me?
I can.
Does anybody know how I can mute everyone else?
Yeah, we're hearing somebody's conversation that we probably shouldn't even be hearing.
Yeah, I'm not sure who it is, but I don't know how to mute everybody. If anybody knows how to tell me how to do that, send text or just speak up.
Yeah. Thank you, Samira. So Emily.
It is, but I don't know if that's worthwhile or not. This is Mike Bergdorf right now, but I know who's on there. I just don't have his number to text him and tell him to be quiet.
Okay. Well, we'll certainly hear the recording for years to come through this, and we'll learn a lot about what he had to say. Thank you, though, for the attempt. Emily, if your governor mandates a close, yes, they can legally force you to close, and you would be fined. That has not happened yet in Tennessee. It has begun to happen in other markets, and it certainly can. Okay, but it has not happened yet in Tennessee.
We're going to do this for 2 weeks or 4 weeks, and
hey, Michael.
Yes.
This is Klaus. I want to build on Adam's question, kind of the second half of his question. Again, assuming for a moment, or assuming for a moment that we know how to kind of support our employees who may be infected or may become sick. But the other part is, I think, obviously, as you touched at the beginning on revenue shortfall is going to be a main issue here. And how to treat employees with respect and dignity who really live from paycheck to paycheck. I probably have a few employees who can stomach a pay cycle missing or two, but most of my employees, I know for a fact cannot. And so how to balance, cash run rate and cash burn on the one hand in an environment with significant revenue downfall or shortfall versus employees who, if we don't pay them, they have to be out on unemployment and probably won't come back.
Yeah. So Klaus, I hear you. The reason I recommended that Adam do an every 2-week rolling is so that you can make adjustments to whatever your plan would be as you learn more. I'm very keen then to hourly workers who do not have the means or savings to survive without a paycheck for a month. There will be a time, I suspect, for some of your companies where a hard decision is going to be made of whether you keep some of those folks or you allow the business to drain all of its cash and then the business would dissolve. Particularly those of us in non-urgent medical, I suspect we're going to be some of the first affected, along with things like hospitality, because non-urgent medical is a place where things can get spread pretty easily. So certainly triaging medical from physicians to urgent cares to ERs, those are all fine. But elective surgeries, physical therapy, chiropractic, dentistry, any sort of elective, my guess is over the next 2 to 3 months, that kind of business is going to dwindle and dwindle and dwindle. And it may come a point where we're just simply not allowed to see folks, as is the case for us right now in Chicago. So I think if you take it as an every 2-week and reassess, you have much more options. And I know that doesn't give your people peace of mind, but it certainly says I'm doing everything I know to do right now, and I'll reassess and I'll keep doing what I can as long as I can. Robbie, your question related to that, can you reduce rates? Yes, you can reduce rates. You absolutely can. You can reduce, you can ask your management team to pay a pay cut. You can simply say, I don't want to do layoffs right now, so I'm going to pay everyone 60% of normal pay or 70% of normal pay for the next few weeks, and let's see where this takes us. You have lots of flexibility because Tennessee is a right to work state, and what you're trying to do is provide a way that people can remain employed even though you can't pay full wages. If someone doesn't want to do that, you may be forced to make the hard call of then do you lay them off if they don't want to do it. But I suspect most people, if they knew you were trying to preserve jobs for them and others, and your options are reducing pay rates or laying people off, would participate in a reduction so that people can stay employed. Jackie, around your question of 1099, I'd be very careful switching a 1099 to a W-2 because if you're doing it in the middle of when it looks like you're going to get some funding for them, people may question you of why you had them in a 1099 status when they should have been W-2 in the first place. I would consult a legal counsel before I did that. I wouldn't just do that. Okay?
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. And I appreciate what you're trying to do, but that's going to raise a lot of red flags if you suddenly need somebody as a W-2 and you didn't in the past, particularly if it's assumed you did it for the sake of a benefit. Okay?
Thank you.
Andrea, your question about we had clients who already want to suspend services due to the unknown scare. What do you suggest we do? I have heard from several folks doing several things, so let me tell you what folks are doing. I have some colleagues who've offered their clients a rate reduction to stay with them over the next 3 to 6 months because they know that consumer purchase is down, travel is down, medical spend is down. So almost every industry is impacted. And it's much harder to get a client back after you've lost them. So my recommendation would be anything you can do to keep the client an active client of any type, even at a reduced rate for a period of time. Some cash flow is better than zero cash flow. and keeping a customer through this period of time will likely earn you real credibility on the other side with them if you did something to try to meet them in the middle. If you lose them entirely, you got to go try to win the business back all over again, and that could be hard, okay? Emily, your question is, if they force closure, can employees file for unemployment? That's a great question, and it's an unanswered question, but we expect an answer this week on if your company's forced to close, can an employee file for unemployment? My guess is going to be absolutely yes, but that would be outside of the normal rules that exist today, but we're living in an unprecedented set of anything but normal. I would imagine, given that we're talking about federally funded sick leave, we will likely expand opportunities around what's going on with closures and filing for unemployment. In the rental business question, I guess this came from Jeff. How do you handle tenants not paying rent? Oh man, I don't know. You are going to be faced with a hard choice there. If folks are not paying rent, what are you going to do? But I think you've got yourself a moral, ethical question there. I don't know how to help you, Jeff. I'm sorry. Same question, Andrea. If you have hourly employees and don't have any work for them, can they file for unemployment? If they are no longer employed with you, they can. If they're terminated, if they are simply reduced hours, they cannot. Adam, you had a comment about insurance and key employees. Oh, did you want to say what you had to share?
Yeah, so I was looking through my insurance policy today to see if I had any business interruption coverage, and I didn't, but I think it's something that maybe everybody should go back through and look and see if there's a civil form potentially in your insurance paperwork about government mandated closures and business interruption. So for us, there was not, but I did find two things I think would be interesting for the group to hear. Number one is that we had a form in our policy that allows us up to $500,000 for AR that we can no longer collect, which could come into play here with people not paying bills. So that's something that, I would recommend people contact your insurance agent about to see if you have something that would pay for AR that isn't being paid. And then the other one is we have a key employees clause that is up to $100,000 for key employees that have to be named on the policy as those key employees, or they have to be have an executive title. I'm just going to name them without telling them on my policy, but that will allow me $100,000 if I have to lay them off due to the business not being capable of paying them. So potentially I could give them, 20 or 30,000 from insurance each to be able to sit tight at home for a minute while we get through this thing if I had to go there. So anyway, just a couple of things I didn't know about until today that I had not heard of before, but maybe it can be helpful for somebody.
Hey, Adam, thank you for sharing. This is Klaus again. I had spoken with Raleigh Howell last week. He's my insurance broker and also a strategic alliance partner for EO. And when we spoke more in generalities, not as specific as some of the points that you just made, but more in generalities, he said all the business interruption policies, have an exclusion on page 200 about virus pandemics and so on. So his initial reaction, that was like Thursday last week that we spoke, but his initial reaction, again, I only asked, of course, about my circumstances, was that no, the odds of getting any business interruption benefits from a carrier are slim to none just because they have exclusions. Don't take it from me. I just wanted to share that since you shared this.
Yeah, thank you, Klaus.
Yeah. Guys, I think the party you're going to see probably the most activity out of over the next 30 days is out of the SBA and out of Congress trying to find ways to put money in the hands of Americans, whether that be through sick leave, some sort of a grant or loans to small businesses. And the reason is that, one terrible element of a pandemic like this is certainly the illness it creates and the disruption in our lives. The second is, trying to avoid both businesses and families falling into bankruptcy with all this going on. So I expect you're going to see a lot out of that. I know the House has been really busy on that, and the Senate's considering a number of tools that the president actually wanted to announce today, but he doesn't have clearance from the Senate yet to get it on his desk, but they're working on it. So keep your eyes peeled and keep up to date with what's going on in the SBA, because I think the SBA is one of the groups that will be most helpful to everyone on this call, given that it is created for the purpose of helping small businesses. Okay, I had somebody that says I have a line of credit at the bank, and you only have some limited cash on hand. If you have cash available on a line of credit, I would likely tap into it, and I would do it before you are not getting the opportunity to tap into it, because banks may feel like they can't at some point. I'm not sure they would do that. But I know it's sure for all of our investment companies, we've already had them completely pull all the cash off their line of credit, because our philosophy, which might be different than some of yours, is our primary job is to remain viable through this. We'll deal with what the debt feels like on the other side, but right now we want to remain viable, and without cash, we're not viable. So we have already gone that route to use our line of credit. Talk it among your management team to make that kind of call, Tim, but that's what those lines are there for, and I would think this is as good as any reason to use it if you need it. Nancy, I like your comment about putting out a message of trying to be calm. I hope a message I put out on LinkedIn and the one Samira sent with you all had some sense of calming and not alarmist in it. But Nancy, I completely agree with you, is that as an entrepreneurial community, if we pull together and help one another and share resources, what we can do to help one another is so much more powerful than anything we're going to find on social media. So any way we can do that, we should. And I will participate in anything anyone can think of that helps our brothers and sisters in EO and Catalyst as we all work through this together. So Nancy, thank you for the suggestion. It was absolutely terrific, and I think that's something we should all do. And Samira, let's chat about that after the call to see what we could do as EO to help facilitate some sort of social messaging as we all work through this together. Okay? I think I've answered most of the other questions that are on there. Does somebody have a question in mind that I missed in the chat that you want to ask?
Maybe Klaus one more time, sorry. I know someone asked a question about, I think from a landlord perspective, real estate and rent. How about from a tenant perspective? What do you think the odds are of, pausing rent payments or, reducing rent payments, or if there's any lawyers here on the video call, is there any, in a typical commercial rental agreement, are there any outs in times like these? Just to pause, not to vacate the building, but just to pause, pause rental payment.
Yeah. So I know that, contracts are contracts and people can be sticklers for them, but I also know that during this period of time, finding somebody to move into your space if you leave it is probably like snow in hell right now. So I would imagine any landlord I'd rather have some cash flow than the person move out and no cash flow. It's going to be really hard to take a lot of legal action on things like that in the next several months, though ultimately someone could. So Klaus, if you can negotiate anything with any vendor that gives you, even if it's not a reduction, but a deferment where you pay some portion of it now and you catch it up later when this is over. We have a number of consultants that help us at Shore that's the model we put them on is we're going to pay them 50 cents on the dollar now, but it doesn't mean we're not going to pay them. We're just going to pay them, catch them up when this is done. And we're giving them the option to cancel their contract with us if they would like, but that's what we're doing to preserve cash. And most of our vendor partners have been quite okay to do that because it's not as though we're not going to pay them. We just don't have the cash flow. Our business has gone from, very full 2 weeks ago to we're at 40% full right now. We fully expect to be at 15 to 20 next week. And so without cash flow, we're trying to just do what we can to manage cash until this is through in the marketplace. And so, paying something now and a commitment for catching it up at the end is a reasonable request. I don't know if it would be honored, but it's certainly a reasonable request. Molly, I saw your note about some folks taking a break from social media. Best way to get messaging to a new client base is honestly to call them. I think right now, people just need to hear from one another. And I will tell you, I am taking almost any call I get because it's so much more connecting to someone than email or text. So by all means, if you have customers or vendors or partners or folks, check in on them, give them a real phone call. Just to say, I am checking on you and see how you are. It means the world to people. It builds relationships in times of crisis. Lots of people are blasting around text and email. So I would choose the very old-fashioned method of talking to people. Okay? Certainly what I'm doing with everybody that I know that I'm connected to. Elizabeth Moss is asking, what industries do I see going to grow as a result? Well, I don't know if you saw, but Amazon announced today they're hiring 100,000 new people, enlarging their distribution centers and hiring more drivers because they think that everybody's going to want things delivered to their door. So I would think anything to do with real estate warehousing or delivery or anything along the supply chain is a good investment right now. I would say any sort of IT that can help people work from home remotely and deal with troubleshooting of a working remote workforce is probably a really good thing to do. Those are some of the things. I also really think when this is over, Elizabeth, that a whole lot of us are going to be stir crazy and want to get the hell out of the house, meet up with people, and I think hospitality will come roaring back because we're all going to be just stir crazy, staring at spouses and children and wishing we could get the hell out of the house. So as much as we love them, we're going to be wanting some opportunity to hang out with other people. Adam Lee has mentioned that he has folks in his IT shop that can help with work capability and enable it remotely. So he's put that on the chat for all of you. Thank you, Adam, for offering that up. That's something somebody may need some help with. So Jeff, your question about dropping rates, the rates went to 0 yesterday. So I don't think they're going to go any lower than 0. Negative interest rates has been done in some other areas, but I suspect the interest rate's going to stay pretty much at 0. Lots of people are trying to refinance some things right now. Saw that on the news feed this morning because interest rates have dropped so absolutely low. I don't know, Jeff, what banks and mortgages are being willing to do. I just know that at a time like this, it's really hard to push someone into to bankruptcy or homelessness. So I suspect, even though you may say they've never done that before, it's probably worth the ask. Okay? And Kathy Thomas is suggesting everyone buy stocks. I just pick the right ones. But a lot of them are down and will likely come back. Okay? I'm glad people haven't lost their sense of humor. I don't want to keep everybody too long on the call. I really appreciate all of you dialing in and being part of this. Samir and I wanted to do this because we simply wanted to be helpful. No other agenda item, but just trying to be helpful. If you need my help in any way, by all means, please reach out. If things change drastically over the next few weeks, we might do this again, and I will send some updates to everybody out through our shared Google email group. All right? The best wishes to everybody. Stay safe. Take care of your family. Take care of yourself and one another, and let's help each other through this crisis. All right, guys?